Hey guys, today I wanted to make a very short and quick video on explaining how I feel like a lot of people who are brand new to tank and maybe not quite so confident with playing it could very quickly improve quite a lot. I'm going to bring up 3 golden rules that should be pretty easy to follow even if you're a brand new player, that should instantly at least somewhat improve your gameplay, and of course the rest should hopefully come to you over time the more you play the game. It's very important to not disappoint the team when you pick tank, because when a tank does badly, it screws over the entire team harder than any other role. The first rule isn't so much a specific tip, but more just to keep in mind what you're actually supposed to do as a tank. Because to a lot of new players, it may seem like the tank role is just a DPS role, but you don't get as much damage, but you get more health. However, the real purpose of the tank role is that tanks, quote-unquote, make space. In other words, tanks make it so that more of the map is relatively safe for your teammates to be in. In games where you get bad tanks who aren't making a lot of space, you'll often be spawn camped and struggling to even make it out the spawn doors. And a lot of the times, good tanks will keep their backline nice and safe, while also making a whole lot of space so they have a whole bunch of different areas they can get to that are really advantageous. I would get more specific here, but the main problem here is that there are a lot of very different kind of tanks in the game, and the way that they all make space is completely different. But I suppose for the sake of this video, most of you will probably want to be sticking with Reinhardt as your first tank since he's the most basic. And the way that Reinhardt makes space is pretty simple. He uses his shield to protect his teammates, and if anyone gets too close to him, well, his hammer should kill them pretty quick. So obviously, anywhere near Reinhardt ends up becoming your space. No one can really walk up to you and kill you very realistically, except maybe a Reaper. The second rule is to be decisive no matter what you do. You see, there are 2 things that a lot of people can complain about in their tanks. The typical stereotype of, oh, my tank's being way too aggressive, they're feeding, they're running into the backline and getting themselves killed. And the complete opposite of, wow, my tank isn't doing anything, they're sitting way too far back, they're not helping the team at all. And if you're a newer player who doesn't necessarily have that instinct yet of when the right time to be aggressive is, it can kind of feel like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And unfortunately, that sense for when you should go in and when you shouldn't is something you'll just have to pick up as you play. If you have good awareness, then I'm sure you'll develop it over time. However, some people who get a bit too worried about their team flaming them start to do something worse than either of those 2 things. Instead of being too aggressive or too passive, they get indecisive. And ultimately, while I can't promise you won't get flamed, at the same time, as someone who has a lot of hours on Ana, I can assure you that I would much rather have an overly aggressive Reinhardt who has no self-preservation instincts than a tank who can't decide whether they want to be aggressive or defensive at basically all times. Being indecisive as a tank most of the time will lead to you getting the worst of both worlds. You'll start doing a push, then decide, actually, I kind of don't want to do this, and then you'll back out. But because your team's already committed to the push and they don't expect you to back out, this will often lead to your teammates dying and you not even getting anything for the push you started because you chickened out of it. So while learning when to go in and when not to go in is a skill you'll just have to develop over time, you'll at least do okay as long as you can make sure that you never act indecisive about it. Once you make a decision, stick with it and see how it turns out. And over time, you'll start to learn, okay, this is a situation where I don't push in, this is a situation where I do push in. But this last tip is honestly the one that I would say is the most important to keep in mind if you want to do good as a tank player. And honestly, it genuinely isn't that hard to follow, but a lot of tank players forget to do this. And so instantly, if you're playing at low ranks, you can really stand out amongst the other tanks and perform a lot better, even if you're not the most mechanically gifted player, if you can just stick to this rule. As a tank, you are very dependent on your supports to succeed, especially if you pick a tank who requires a lot more healing to be effective, like Reinhardt, Ramatra, or Orisa. However, there is not a single support in the game who is able to heal you through walls. The closest thing is Kiriko can teleport to you through walls and then heal you, but then she's in mortal danger. You can often get away with being very aggressive as a tank and getting very far away from the rest of your team, as long as you at least still have line of sight of your team and haven't gotten around a corner or behind a wall so that you can be healed while you're going in. Especially if you have a support like Ana, who can heal you from an enormous distance and provide an enormous amount of healing as long as you don't break line of sight, then yeah, you can get a whole bunch of value and get away with some really aggressive plays as long as you never break that line of sight. Essentially, you just need to make a mental note of any time you go around a corner, and as far as you're aware, your team hasn't followed you around that corner, you should make a mental note that I will not get any more healing until I go back round where I came from. For the most part, as a support, it's a bad idea to be put into a situation where you need to be chasing your tank to keep them alive. It's usually smarter for the support to simply just sit back and wait for you to come back, and if you don't come back, tough luck. because if they go to chase you to maybe save you, a lot of the times they end up dying for it too, and you end up losing team fights off of that. There are simply a lot of players out there who might not be mechanically bad at the game, and hey, they might even technically have good awareness most of the time, but they just instinctually hide around corners because they think they don't want enemies to have line of sight of them, forgetting that their allies also need line of sight of them to get healed. If you can simply make a habit of trying to always keep line of sight of your supports, no matter what you're doing as tank, then you can probably get away with so much more than even the most skilled tanks who are going without their supports.
So, just as a bonus, I wanted to look at some of this footage in post. You see, when I recorded the voiceover, I didn't yet have the footage, so I didn't know what would be playing in the background. And this moment in this game is one of the best examples I could think of what I'm talking about right now. Now, I actually do make a small misplay here, I do think, but the way I handle it here will explain what I mean and how valuable it is, knowing the positioning of your supports, at least vaguely. So of course, being the tank, I'm at the front line here, and while I know that there are teammates behind me, I don't know exactly where all of them are, and I've got other things to focus on, so of course I don't know exactly where everyone is. I just know they're generally behind me. This is shortly after the first team fight, and at this point we've already killed their Winston and their Genji, so I know that the only people left are their 2 supports and one of their DPS. I also already know that their other DPS is Ashe, and the only support I've seen so far is this Kiriko. I start trying to chase this Kiriko, and I nearly kill her, and she gets life gripped away by Lifeweaver, who it turns out was the second support, and this Ashe comes to throw a dynamite on me. Now, I've still got a lot of health left, over 400, with some armor, so I think I still want to keep chasing. I wouldn't do this if their tank was still alive, or if they had a DPS with a high damage output who could melt me quickly, but considering the only DPS left alive is a DPS who's supposed to fight me at long range, and I'm pretty close to them, I feel like this is pretty favourable to me, and so I go in for the kill. Unfortunately, this does not work out, because not only am I already taking the fire damage, but to chase them I have to run around this corner, and I am no longer getting healed by my supports. As well as that, they had Suzu, and they had, platform, they had enough ways to get out. I maybe could have killed this Ashe if I reacted fast enough to the fact she was hiding in this room, but by the time I noticed she was there, I felt like she had too much time to get away, and I also don't know if she has Coach Gun or not right now, and so if I run at her and she does have Coach Gun, she probably just Coach Guns me away and lives. So then I back out. So I want to set a few things straight. First of all, this could be seen as being indecisive, and obviously I've already said that's one of the rules, don't be indecisive. And unfortunately this is a bit where you have to have a little bit of game sense to distinguish what I mean when I say indecisive. It's fine to back out of a push if you realize the reason the push isn't working is because literally no one is doing this push except you, and if there's a realistic chance you can back out and live. The main problem with being indecisive comes in when you are being indecisive about a push when your team's following you. If your team is following in with you, then yeah, that's pretty bad if you suddenly decide, well actually I don't feel like doing this push. Here it's fine for me to back out, because the whole reason this push failed is because, since I only vaguely knew that my team was behind me, I thought they were close enough that they would be able to catch up to me and finish off these enemies. However, no one gets to me in time, and so I realised, well, if no one's going to be able to follow up on this, then I've overextended a bit and I need to get back and just get healed. As well as that, it might sound really obvious, but I want you to pay attention to the exact moment I start getting healed. The second that we pass this little wall here. And I knew that I could get back here without dying, because already, back when I first started charging at them, I made that subconscious mental note the second that I crossed that spot that, okay, I'm not getting any more healing anymore, and I took a quick look at my health bar, and I'm like, I could probably make this work with 400 health. Of course, it didn't work out in the end. If there was follow-up from my DPS, it would have worked out, but I didn't realise that my DPS were further back than I thought. Again, it's just one of the downsides of tank, you can't always see what's going on behind you. But yeah. But thankfully I can just hold block to keep alive and walk back a bit, and my Ana gets to heal me. And this is not only great because it means that obviously I'm alive, I don't die here, I don't feed, but even better, it means that my Ana gets a ton of ult charge. You gotta remember that your support's ultimates are the most important ultimates in the game usually, and your supports want that ult charge. They want to heal you not only because healing usually means you do better, but also because they want to charge their ultimates.
Oh, and I guess just a little bonus rule, although this probably won't be very important at lower ranks because people don't tend to communicate as much. Generally, you should trust your support's judgment as a tank. While ultimately you're in control as a tank, at the same time, since you're the front line, it's often quite hard to know what's going on behind you. And while occasionally taking a moment to look back and see where everyone is a good idea, sometimes you just don't have enough time to do it. It's fine to, as a tank, sometimes be a bit tunnel visioned and only be able to see forward and not know exactly what's going on behind you. But you should keep in mind that if your supports are asking you to do something, if they're telling you to fall back or they're telling you to go a certain way and peel to protect someone, then you should probably do it. Since the supports are sat at the back, they can see the entire team, and so they know where everyone is and who's in trouble, and they can also see everyone's health through walls. They have a lot more information to work with than you, so unless you are absolutely certain you can close out an important kill and you can't do what they're asking right this second, usually you should listen to what they say. But as I say, that one I suppose doesn't apply quite as much because you might get some bad advice from lower ranked supports if you're newer to the game, or as well as that, you're unlikely to get many supports that are very communicative with you anyway. With that being said, those are my basic tips to end up playing tank a whole lot better, hopefully, if you are new to the game and you have been struggling with the tank role. I might make a video in future talking more specifically about the different types of tanks, because quite obviously a tank like Wrecking Ball achieves the job of a tank in a very different way to a tank like Reinhardt or Ramatra. That being said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.